Hi, pleasure to be here. So, big data, advanced analytics. First, just a short query. How many here work with big data or have big data in their company? Okay, that's a fair amount. So big data, I mean, you can have big data problems without having big data. Big data problems, I think, is a little bit more interesting to talk about rather than big data itself, because it's about how we solve the big data problems that's interesting. Advanced analytics then. Advanced analytics is not your standard sums or average or just getting some pure descriptive analytics. It's about the next step into kind of your predictive, prescriptive analytics that you've heard people here talk about earlier. Combining these two elements together creates a whole new set of problems. You will face kind of computational problems. I mean, the algorithms that you run, they will kind of kill your machines. I am a data scientist, and I like to say that I am the IT department's worst enemy, because I will break every one of your IT systems. No kidding. So, I think a relevant aspect of all of this is what's been my big data journey? How did I get into this position? And what kind of troubles have I come across along the way? I started out 10 years ago in Nordea. And keep in mind, I have a finance background in the beginning. So I started out fresh out of finance school. I went into Nordea, and my first task I was assigned with was to fix their fraud or credit fraud problem. Because at that time, 10 years ago, they had kind of a lot of fraud problems back then, because there weren't really no security measures 10 years ago. We have that today, or they have that today. But back then, it was problematic. So I started out with, well, you can imagine, Nordea, the largest financial institution in the Nordics. They have a lot of cards out there. They have a lot of credit cards out there. And you can imagine how much people use them. So that was, 10 years ago, a big data problem for me. 10 years ago, I kind of was faced with the situation, how do I do this? There was nobody to answer these questions. It was not a hot topic as it is today. When I asked for reports, I went to the IT department, and they told me, you can have the reports 2 to 3 months after something has happened, and you will not get everything you need because we don't have that. So that's the kind of situation, that was the big data problem I had back then. And I mean, a fraud problem when it comes to credit cards is a problem which happens right here, right now, and the losses are associated with everything we can't stop. So you can imagine waiting 3 months for getting answers and adjust the systems can be quite expensive. So how did I solve it? Well, I sampled. Today I would be a bit ashamed, but I had to sample. So we just broke it down, we went to where do we have fraud, and we were very kind of axing it out. We couldn't really do much back then. Fast forward a couple of years. I did credit cards, then I moved into AML. And in Nordea, AML is still a hot topic today. I moved in early ages when they just implemented the system, and I was assigned with kind of fix the problems when it comes to AML. How do we detect money laundering? And for those of you who doesn't know what AML is, it says for anti-money laundering. And it's a part of EU directives, and banks need to follow this legislation. So you need to do this stuff. How do we detect people laundering money? How do we detect people sending payments to terrorists? How do we stop the bad guys? Well, that's another big data problem for us back then. We had the technology, we were a little bit more advanced, we had bought the best system out there, but still, we couldn't really ask the questions that we wanted to ask on the data that we had. It was very problematic. How do we solve the big data problem back then? Well, we worked with profiles instead. So we took each data point, we kind of created a profile, and we could detect outliers, and we could be somewhat precise. It's not the optimal way of working, but that was the reality that we worked in. Fast forward 2 or 3 more years, I was back working with cards. I was then an analytics manager. And this was when kind of the hype started out. Big data was on the wall. Everybody wanted to do big data. So we didn't have any big data systems then. So what I did was that I tagged along with one of the major providers. I did a proof of value. So I took a lot of data, I anonymized it, and I parsed through a couple of billion lines of credit card history. And I was able to make the first predictive model in Nordea on big data related to cards. So we were able to take that model, put it into production, and reduce fraud with 30% overnight. That kind of a big win with just utilizing big data and advanced analytics. But it took a fair amount, 8 years, before we were mature to do that. And then kind of the big data journey in Nordea kicked on, and I think it's still ongoing. I then left Nordea in December this year, and I moved to London, working for Vodafone now with a completely different story, where we currently work with 423 million customers, and we actually are having 10% of the world's internet traffic passing through our networks. We are having one of the largest mobile banking platforms in the world, and we are also kind of just starting out our journey. Early stages still, but it's an exciting journey. So, that's not formatted right. But what it's going to say is the secret of getting ahead is getting started. And I think that's a key point. So what I did early stages was that I kind of wanted to get started. And I always like to run really, really fast. I actually had a manager say that you need to stop because people need to catch up. And I said they need to run faster. But my point is, if you want to get going into this, you need to find kind of your champion's use cases. You need to prove value. I think it's good to have a vision, and of course you should have a vision, but just starting from the vision and then a large investment doesn't really follow a logic that I can understand, because everything is moving. And somebody already said it, the only constant is change. So if you define a vision and a strategy, how do you know that you're doing it right? So start with kind of proving value first. Team up with somebody that knows how to do this. Build your proof of values. Don't invest a lot in your own infrastructure at once. That's just my advice, and that's worked for me. When it comes to vendors then, I don't know how many of you know what a blue ocean is, but a blue ocean is pretty much a space where there's not so many people fighting over the kind of the same profits. If you look on kind of the vendors that's out there today, there are many. And they're growing each day, each week, each month, each year. They're just becoming more and more and more. And many of them is just, I'm sorry to say this, but the same old crap in a new brand. I mean, don't use old technology to solve new problems. That's just my main message. Be careful before choosing, and try to kind of have your vision clear, have your proof of values. Please go along and team up with vendors to kind of prove the value, but be clear about that. But be very careful. What I'm looking for when I'm looking for somebody to partner up with is new technology, born on big data when you have a big data problem. You don't want somebody going from legacy into something new. You want something that was born into digitalization. You want something that actually understands the problems. So, where do we go from there? It's a really good question. I mean, nobody can predict the future. Bad choice of words. I can predict the future. I do that for a living. But, I mean, really, where do we want to be? So, one thing I say to a lot of people, don't go out and buy appliances. Try to keep it in-house, and try to have something that you have control over. I mean, this is the latest pet I bought for my kids, but it's also Hadoop. I mean, I just love the concept of Hadoop. I mean, what I've heard is one of the things coming up with Hadoop is because they wanted to make a copy of the internet. And in order to make a copy of the internet, you need a place to store it, right? And the internet is growing all the time, and you need something that can grow with you. You need a distributed place of storage. You need a common place of storage. You don't know how much data you're going to have tomorrow. You don't know how much data you're going to have in 10 years. You don't know about all these things yet. You might have an idea, but things will change. So you need something that can change with you. You need something you can put in your infrastructure that you can work with. You need to be able to store it once and use it many times. Of course, I assume many of you already know about Hadoop. Many of you have already evaluated this solution for your organization. But what I also see is that a lot of people don't really understand the power that actually comes with Hadoop. Because Hadoop is not just storage. Hadoop is an ecosystem. It's an ecosystem that actually evolves all the time. And this is something that's really, really cool. Because, I mean, the first times I started playing around with this, I did it on my laptop. I installed a Hadoop kind of from, I think, what's Hortonworks or Cloudera that you could play around with and learn the tool sets. And I just was struck by how easy it was for me because I had some programming skills, and I thought it was really cool back then. But I couldn't really do much more. And then as the years went along, it matured, it became more enterprise ready. New tools came to the ecosystems. New improvements came to the ecosystems. So going to one of the big vendors, you might face a situation where you're buying an appliance and you're going to stick with it for 10 years. I've seen that happen before with a lot of different solutions. But what I see from the Hadoop distribution is it's quite easy to add new tools to the stack. And you can utilize these tool sets to drive value from the data you store in there. So it's just not about offloading the data and just keep it back there and then put something on top and kind of query it a little bit. It will constantly evolve with you. And I think that's one of the mindset I hear when I talk about people actually doing this stuff and putting it into production. They see new things coming and they can act rather rapidly. And then, of course, you have the kind of good things about big data and advanced analytics on top of this. So yeah, I know you heard all this before, but I just like underlining. So how do you drive value from it? Do you Spark? I didn't a couple of years ago, but I do now. And Spark is one of the components in the ecosystem which has just changed the way I work with data, changed the way I work with big data, because it's just given me an opportunity to query data instantly. So let's take it from the top. With Spark, you can do pretty much everything you want to do. You can do your ETL. You can do your kind of data querying. You can store the data or consist it into Hadoop. And you can do your predictive modeling, and you can even use it for streaming. And it's fast. It's faster than pretty much anything else working on kind of the Hadoop ecosystem. And it's just really cool. And you can use it for streaming. So you can use it for kind of having your open APIs and everything integrated to it. So if you're installing Hadoop, don't forget to Spark. And don't forget to look for that talent, because Spark is really going to change the world, especially in the new couple of versions coming, because they're adopting it even more to how you work with big data and advanced analytics. So I hope you all, as me, think this sounds pretty cool, because I really love this stuff. But the big question then is, what's next? And I mean, it really is a brave new world out there. The way we work with data, the way we derive insight, and the way we all are going to interact in the future is going to change. I mean, me, myself, I work for kind of the largest or the second largest telco provider in the world. And we have, I mean, I guess every one of you have one of these. And this is really going to change everything, because all of a sudden we are all connected. We are all going to interact in new ways, and we are all going to kind of see changes coming along. So what we are doing, or what I'm doing these days, is trying to make the world a better place. And I'm not meaning that to sound a bit pompous out here, but we really are, because it's all about the customers. It's all about making your experience better. And when you're experiencing better, and we're taking away all the pains with predictive analytics and advanced analytics, it's going to be a better world. And one of the things we're also doing, as somebody here said, it was two ladies from the UN working with the hunger programs. Why I love working for Vodafone at this stage is because they have an outreach program like that. So we are currently working with several different companies. We are providing support to the refugees at this stage. We're providing with telco communications. And we're also working with governments in Africa to kind of stop diseases from spreading, like Ebola in the future. So taking our telco data, transforming the insights we can do to make this a better and safer world. And I think we're going to see more initiatives like this, and we're going to realize that everything is connected, and everything is communication, and data will drive this kind of going forward. And that's what I wanted to say.